wisdom rolls like rolling docks. A Sharpie and a die keeps the haters away. Dance with the rhythm, let the doubt decay. The stars align in their cosmic ballet. Jason was right, hear the truth relay. Time's a trickster, a game it plays, but a shower is constant through the haze. Feel the pulse of the universe blaze. Jason knew it in the olden days.
And that's what this video is about. I'm going to educate you on something no one else is talking about. All the prophetic timelines from Christian eschatologists, the interpretations of the different ancient calendars of the world and how they relate to us today means nothing. So many chronologists and chronographers from the ancient past were wrong because they didn't take this into account. But we have so many historical records concerning this event. It is shocking to me that in the year 2021, that me, an ex-convict, is unveiling this for the public. It has to be known by somebody, but they're not publishing it, so I'm going to do it for them. Now here's a mystery that begs the question: did Heinrich Schliemann actually discover the ruins of Troy, or did he find the other ruins and then claim they were the Trojan site? I ask this because according to this book, written 301 years ago, Troy was located in ancient Phrygia. But in Homer's Iliad, Troy is allied to the king of Phrygia. And it's located somewhere else. It's in Ilium. So I don't know. Kind of wonders, kind of throw this old book kind of throws a lug in old Schliemann's discovery. We don't know if that's Troy or not now. So on page 140 we read, "If we believe the ancients, death was a deity who they adored as the most implacable goddess." Now, in 1900, in the translations of Thomas Campbell of the old Akkadian and Babylonian text, the scholars of the day arbitrarily inserted the word Jupiter in their translations, admitting that Jupiter was known by other names. But in their explanatory notes, they concede that the actual 3,000-year-old texts read Nibiru and Sagmagar, which was also Nibiru according to the ancient and modern translator. All I'm going to do is suspect that the elite, call them royal families, whatever we want. I don't know anything about the 13 families. I know it's a prominent theory, but I just know I haven't seen any evidence for that in any historical books, but it very well could be true. But I believe that anybody ruling the world right now is doing it by contract. They have agreed to maintain that role, and they have agreed to accept certain rights, privileges, and immunities and amenities in order to do that. Under the perfect biospheric conditions of the day star, the greater sun, and a lesser sun far away to illuminate gently the night skies, the prehistoric creatures known to us as dinosaurs from the alleged Precambrian to the Jurassic periods flourished, growing to immense sizes because of the vitamin, nitrogen-enriched soil and vegetation, oxygen-dense atmosphere, and outer water canopy that magnified the heavens while also diffusing light and deflecting away harmful radiation. However, this was not millions of years ago, as we will see here. Even today, under pristine conditions and diet, amphibians and reptiles grow to truly astonishing sizes. You will learn what our predecessors knew when they designed these calendars and monuments that still stand majestically in Egypt. The future is a continuation of an ancient architect's blueprints, and these designs were well concealed and yet hidden in plain sight. The template of tomorrow has always been with us. From distant times in the records of the Anunna, it was always known as the Tablet of Destinies. Before 5239 BC, Homo Annunnas returned to the Earth's surface to find They returned to find that their robust, dark-skinned hominid upgrade manufactured at their previous visit, known to us as Neanderthal, were inadequate for their mining needs. Unsupervised, this primitive Homo inferior has fallen into disorganized hunter-gatherer groups who domiciled in caves rather than worked them for ore. While bred for strength, they were intelligent and artistic. The disappointed Anunna visiting Earth let them be and redesigned Homo inferior into a more capable worker. This is Cro-Magnon, who exploded onto the scene. No evolutionary development, just appeared, whole communities of Cro-Magnon. Today, scientists accept that Neanderthals were not human ancestors, but were an entirely different race. Mitochondrial DNA analysis concludes that Neanderthals did not contribute substantially to the modern human genome. Cro-Magnon man is an anomaly, superior to Neanderthal and of an independent lineage. Cro-Magnon appeared suddenly with mysteriously improved skeletal characteristics and with a cranial capacity that is amazingly in excess of 100 cubic centimeters of that of modern man. Shorn and elder gods in antiquity wrote that Cro-Magnon man simply appeared suddenly on Earth within the midst of Neanderthals. Science simply does not know how such an event could have occurred. What? These brainiacs assert that the dinosaurs were wiped out 65 million years ago and that Cro-Magnon were supposed to be 64.5 million years closer in time to us today, and they can't solve this local mystery? So much for nicely packaged theory. And our learned writer here on page 138 continues. This observation has not hitherto been made and is most remarkable and necessary for the understanding the Egyptian chronology and highly deserves the attention of the learned reader. Whether Manetho had any other foundation than what I have supposed for fixing the beginning of Vulcan's reign, just 1,200 years of 360 days each before the flood, and of making it commence 1,072 years after the creation cannot be shown. But yet, as Vulcan was a Phoenician deity, brought with several others into Egypt by the first Hermes, and appeared by the old Phoenician annals made by use of Sanchoniathon to have lived many centuries before the flood. I have shown that chronologically and traditionally, Enki was remembered 2,000 years later by the Jewish scribes as Enoch, and that Enoch and Enki are linked to Giza and the Great Pyramid Complex. Further, in my book When the Sun Darkens, I cite the ancient sources that show that Enoch and the house of Enoch were associated to the Phoenix and the mansion of the Phoenix, the Bin of ancient Heliopolis in Egypt. Because of the amazing facts and formerly forgotten information found within these two books, Ancient Symbol Worship and The Natural Genesis, as well as other works by Massey, these books will be cited over and over in future videos in our journey to understand Enoch and his times. The Alcuin translation in 800 AD, over 12 centuries ago, reads, "And the soul of Enoch was wrapped up in the instruction of the Lord, in knowledge and in understanding, and he wisely retired from the sons of men, and secreted himself from them for many days. And all the kings of the sons of men, both first and last, together with their princes and judges, came to Enoch when they heard of his fame, and they bowed to him. And they also required of Enoch to reign over them, to which he consented. And they assembled all 130 kings and princes, and they were all under his power and command. And Enoch taught them wisdom and knowledge in the ways of the Lord, and he made peace amongst them, and peace was throughout the earth during the reign of Enoch. And Enoch reigned over the sons of men 243 years, and he did righteousness and justice with all his people." The identity of Enoch is having ruled over 130 kings and rulers who established an empire that endured 243 years, a regent spiritually attuned to the Creator, who also left upon the earth an enduring testimony designed to last until the last generations could not possibly have been forgotten. As we will see, there remains astonishing confirmation concerning this antediluvian king and the legacy he left behind, still standing silently upon the Giza Plateau. All these traditions about a crucified Savior, Let me tell you guys, these aren't 2,000 years old. Christianity did not invent this. There are many academics and scholarly books that you can find online in Google, and you will find that there are literally 16 to 18 different crucified saviors throughout the historical record before Christianity. Jesus was not the only one, but it's this is really the imagery of a benefactor coming into our world, giving us something that we wouldn't have been able to give ourselves. And in the case of Jesus, it was these divine parables that actually show us many amazing things, giving us this hope, giving us all these spiritual teachings. And the Prometheus version is no different. It is a benefactor that appears in a dark time of humanity and provides humanity something that they really need, and they are rewarded with basically an execution or a death. They die. I believe Prometheus is just another way of talking about the exact same benefactor, that no matter how bad our reality gets inside this construct, there is a benefactor force. If there wasn't, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing now, talking about it. We wouldn't be able to enjoy all the things we're enjoying in life right now. Yeah, there's always an opposing force. So it's when the darkness, it's when the darkness starts getting darker. It's when those with light start shining brighter. I mean, there's always an equal answer to whatever the problem is. Though the forgeries of Jasher were many, there were some 19th century historians who recognized the importance of these records, writers who contributed to our understanding of the accomplishments of Enoch and the world he lived in. In 1875, the authors Hodder M. Westrop and C. Staniland Wake, two of my favorite authors, by the way, both referred to the Book of Jasher as a credible source of historical information in their own book, Ancient Symbol Worship, a work that extensively expounds upon the religions of antiquity. As these videos will show, in the progression of the data as it unfolds, the Caucasian race was created long after the races were already well established on this earth. And the Caucasian race was established because of a major rift in Anunnaki society. There was a war, and in this civil war, the revolters, the rebellers, those who were considered the bad guys, in an effort to continue the propagation of their own species, Earthside created the Caucasian race as an act of rebellion. By mating physically with their product, the daughters of men, these rebellious Anunnaki fathered the ancestors of the Caucasian race, its Aryan and Semitic branches, who not only inherited the fair-featured characteristics of these benefactors, but also received some technology, written records, knowledges, and the genetic traits of imagination, creativity, inventiveness, abstraction, and the colonial spirit. If you don't understand what that means, I'm going to tell you right now. The Chinese have a very interesting tradition concerning the stars and the sun. If the stars and the sun ever misbehave and people die or go hungry because of it, they have to change their emperor because the mandate of heaven has changed. If the emperor can't maintain order, he can't stay as emperor. So when the mandate of heaven changes, the people rise up in rebellion and they overthrow their government. The Chinese were the first revolutionaries. This was the first dynasty of China known as the Five Monarchs, in which there are actually 9 rulers, a dynasty enduring 646 years to the year 2206 BC, when it ended in a flood. This is 24 years variance from the Sumerian king list, which shows the Anunnaki dynasty of 7 kings, other versions 10 kings, began 670 years before the Great Flood in 2239 BC. This demonstrates that the Chinese tradition is the same as the Sumerian version. Chinese dragons, strangely, are bearded. The beard was the chief trait of foreigners who ruled over them. The dragons were ancient rulers, and later in Chinese history, it was the rulers of their own people that were linked to these ancient strangers who brought them civilization. The Chinese emperor was believed to have dragon blood. Emperor Yao was called dragon-faced, which was not a description of a reptilian visage, but of a human face with a beard. Chinese traditions link the dragon with the development of man and his instructions in the arts and agriculture. The Chinese story of bearded Anunnaki people bringing civilization is the same as the Sumerian version. There are no differences.
No one knows what happened to those children. And in the year 1212, we have mass human vanishings and we have quakes in the Middle East. But the human vanishings in the year 1212 are connected to a very intriguing story called the Children's Crusade. Two kids started going through Europe preaching that since the adults can't defeat the Muslims and free Jerusalem from the heathens, then it must be the children of God who are supposed to do it. The movement gained ground, and within months, hundreds of thousands of children throughout Europe marched toward Jerusalem. No one knows what happened to those children. The historians of the day have left us many records about the children passing through their townships and towns and whole long trains, armies of kids moving toward the south and Jerusalem. There are no historians from that period that tell us what happened to those children. We do have many historians trying to tell us what they think happened to those children, only in retrospect, long after. We don't know what happened to them. Nor is there any records whatsoever in any of the Muslim caliphates, and they were very extensive record keepers. Nothing about the arrival of all these children, armies of children, in the Muslim lands. They never made it. We don't know what happened to those people. We don't know what wired all these kids up to do to march like that. It's a mystery. It's a Pied Piper of Hamelin type mystery.
The Asian Oriental was the epitome of Anunnaki genetic in vitro fertilization engineering using Anunnaki birth goddesses. The Oriental spirit of permanence, patience, humility, preservation of cultural institutions over millennia, explosions of brilliance only to be snuffed out by the masses programmed to maintain the status quo. The Anunnaki nerve system marks the appearance of the moon, which caused a cataclysmic flood. Then the appearance of the Nemesis X object to cause the Gihon flood. Now the Chronology marks the great flood of Noah in biblical infamy as the year 2239 BC. And true to form, it is another object from the dying Nemesis system that causes this most terrible of flood catastrophes. It is the Phoenix. The Earth, the Moon, the Nemesis X object, and the Phoenix. These are the themes of the Anunnaki Chronology. Yes, the elite will have many facilities underground awaiting this apocalypse. Some of them will not survive. These survivors were regarded as gods. They were called Anunnaki later, Anunna. They were called Igigi. They were called Merits, Titans, Tuatha-De Danann. Great leaders were Mean, Sargon I of Akkad, Hammurabi, Judea of Sumer, Manco Capac, Quetzalcoatl, Veracocha, the Scorpion King. You know many of these names throughout history. You see, the Anunnaki phenomenon has turned what appear to be perfectly rational people into subjects of massive suspension of disbelief. Now, suspension of disbelief is what is necessary for someone to accept everything else as real. Many people who have read Zechariah Sitchin actually believe that the Sumerians only 5,000 years ago, writing on clay tablets, recorded historical events about what happened 450,000 years earlier. To believe this narrative, they have accepted that these Anunnaki figures themselves lived for 50 to 100,000 years long. So when I state, excuse me, but you do know that in all the representations and reliefs in ancient Sumerian and Babylonian iconography that the Anunnaki are always shown as bearded, right? I'm always met with silence. So the gods are bearded. That's cool. I can accept that. I personally cannot take seriously anyone who claims to have a modicum of education and yet tries to explain to me how people lived for tens of thousands of years. We have absolutely no ancient records of anybody living for long periods of time until the 1st century BC. We have a few mentions here and there of people living 215 years, something like that. But let me tell you something. We don't have anything like hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, even the Genesis account, which can't date earlier than the 3rd century BC, only mentions people living up to 900 and something years. So, and their lifespans rapidly decreased. So, it's very difficult for me. But the book of Enki is just like the Bible. It's a work of fiction written by Jews. Now, there are no references in any Near Eastern texts or traditions of drop ships, capital ships, aircraft. Not one Near Eastern text can be produced by anyone that states that any group of gods or people came from a place called Nibiru or dropped from the sky. Those texts do not exist. They are inferred. If you are of the opinion that 5,000 years ago, writing on clay tablets could have recorded anything that had happened 450,000 years previous, then you can be made to believe in anything. Your Netflix version of history will conform to every turn you need it to suspend your disbelief. But what I'm going to show you is that there is a celestial object out there, the dark satellite, which has nothing to do with the phoenix. And every time that it appears, Anunnaki either suddenly appear on Earth or they depart. I'm going to provide you the exact chronology for this, just like I provided you the Phoenix chronology. I have waited over a year and a half to release this Anunnaki chronology because it's shocking. It has everything to do with the last days. It is the reason why Phoenix will be here on May 16th in the year 2040. 6 years later, this object's coming too. Its history is undeniable. I'm going to show it to you year after year after year, the exact mathematical pattern that shows over 5,500 years of world history perfectly all the way up till 2046 when it will come back again. As seen by Nostradamus and dated by Nostradamus, as even shown by Mother Shipton. It's coming back. It's the real death bringer of the Hopi. And it's another... This chronology will be revealed in the ANUNNA files. When the gods appeared on Earth, they were tall, blue, and green-eyed, grew long facial hair, and had white skin. To the antediluvian peoples of a post-apocalyptic Earth, many centuries after a prior civilization fell, the gods were Caucasians. 2 groups of ANUNNA, a civil war. Both sides, Caucasians. Both groups guilty of DNA manipulations and the creating of designer Homo sapiens sapiens. Designer DNA programs carried out to create separate Homo sapien races. ANUNNA supervised mining and labor settlements. Homo sapien population explosion then out of control. One group still able to move in and out of this holosphere containment field at specific windows of time. And they sought to erase their trespass by killing off their product, creating cataclysms to destroy humanity. The other group was led by Enki, who was marooned on Earth to live among the humans that he sought to save. An interesting theory? No. These facts will be proven many times over with verifiable source materials as these videos progress. It was during the contact period, 3439 to 2647 BC, all before the flood, when both groups of Anunnaki abandoned the practice of using surrogate ANUNNA females, birth goddesses, and began extensive ANUNNA human interbreeding, but with totally different results. There is no doubt in my mind. And the Cro-Magnon may be the Cro-Magnon that we have found in the caves around the Mediterranean and Levant area. The Cro-Magnon may be those ANUNNA who were abandoned on the surface, while the other ANUNNA were just quite safe in the underworld. The aphelion is its furthest distance away from the sun. These so-called Pleiadians told people the exact opposite of the truth. Had this 575.5-year orbit and 1680 date been believed and made popular today, then humanity would be totally caught by surprise in 2046, thinking they still had 209 years remaining before the destroyer returned in the year 2255 AD.
Aleister Crowley said the year would be 1904. 1906, I think. He was always telling in many of his books that 1906 was the year. But I mean, even if it's slightly correct, I mean, isn't it interesting that we've got different schools and different sources for this period of time that would disrupt the beautiful, peaceful Russian civilization with all kinds of terrorist attacks and false flags, pretty much what they have been doing up until March 20 of 2020. All of a sudden, there's no more false flags, but there's another word that came along with a big capital C, and all of a sudden the false flags stopped, didn't they? All the shootings and everything. A whole new different shift came along. Where are those shootings now all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's crazy. But you know what? They never stop. The Bolsheviks, they're still doing everything they did in 1902 and in 1917. They've never stopped. All they have done is assumed a different garb. They're still doing it.
Yeah, I'm glad you recognise it's the Bolsheviks. I always pretty much include them in the top 5, always, of the source of all the trouble on earth. You know, I mean, you can mention the Vatican and the Jesuits, but if you do not understand Bolshevism and its inception into this world, into this simulacrum, then you will never, ever understand what's happening today. To understand what's happening today with the far left and all of these other so-called terrorist attacks, you must be well-versed in the Bolshevik Revolution and understand all of that.
Their chief motto is war by deception, and they're good at it. My book publishing all of these findings and more that are not even mentioned in my videos was titled Anunnaki Homeworld and was finished in 2010 and published in 2011. In the book, I explained that the Mayan long count could never have ended in the year 2012, and that the following year of 2012 would pass by without incident. In just 144 years after the appearance of Luna, the Anunna built a fantastic civilization that again threatened the simulacrum. The programmed holography minions, the Igigi, were unable to suppress the growth and advancement of the Anunna. So in 3895 BC, the Phoenix weapon reappeared. The first generation of infants born were Caucasians having dark recessive gene characteristics, white people with dark hair and dark eyes, but the second and third generation females were fair, appearing more and more like the Anunna themselves. The Anunna human crossbreeding program, sometime after the start of the contact period in 3439 BC, but in 2839 BC, the project was completed with the birth of Homo sapiens who were of the same DNA and appearance as Homo Anunna. They were indistinguishable. The Anunna made secret plans. Knowing they were trapped in this holographic prison, they understood that no technology they could achieve would allow them to escape our world. That Earth was a closed system despite the lie of the simulacrum in perpetuating the deception of a vast cosmos. China called it the Thing. The Nordics called it the Fenris. In Greek, it was Typhonius, Typhon, Phoenix, Nah. It has many different names, but it's all the exact same thing. In the old Jewish rabbinical records, they called it the Angel of Death, and they said it visits our world. This is in the Jewish Haggadah. And it says it visits our world every 138 years. Now it says, to the Grand Master, masters, wardens, and brethren of the most ancient and most honorable fraternity of Freemasons of Great Britain and Ireland, Brother Eugenius Philolethes sendeth greeting. On page 5 of the dedication, Eugenius borrows heavily from the Christian mysteries, writing, remember that you are the salt of the earth, the light of the world, and the fire of the universe. Ye are living stones built up of a spiritual house, who believe and rely on the chief lapis angularis, which the refractory and disobedient builders disallowed. You are called from darkness to light. You are a chosen generation. What? So here is a 300-year-old reference to the chief cornerstone, the stone the builders rejected, called here the lapis angularis, or the stone angled. This is Jason of Archaix.com. This is episode 7 of the ANUNNA files. Imagine how ancient records describe somebody descending from a mountain. And yet, thousands of years later, it turns into descending from the heavens. Imagine further that very old traditions and written records preserved today perfectly describe the arrival of a technologically advanced race of people never before seen on ships. Ships that sailed over the great deep, the ocean. But thousands of years later, those ships came from space. Imagine that. What the ancient Egyptians believed is exactly what the Toltecs taught centuries ago. That after the cataclysm, the first cataclysm was called the Water Sun Age. The Water Sun Age collapsed, called the Water Sun. How does water and sunlight go together? The sun is a burning disk, right? And water is wet. How do they go together? Unless you come to the conclusion that the sun was born out of water because water fell from the sky. The vapor canopy collapsed, and that's what made the sun visible. Humans focusing on humans after the departure of the Anunna in 2647 BC, the final year of the contact period, led to the stellar theologies of subordinate deities, the Anunna in service to a goddess, the moon or god, the sun. Sin, the name of the moon, was originally male in the Sumerian text, but this gender identity among goddess worshippers fell into disrepute, just as did the older solar goddess associations in the Far East. Professor G.R.S. Mead, in Fragments of a Forgotten Faith, wrote, "A persistent tradition in connection with all the great mystery institutions was that their several founders were the introducers of all sorts of civilization. They were either themselves gods or were instructed by gods. In brief, that they were men of a far greater knowledge than any who had come after. They were the teachers of infant races, souls belonging to a more highly developed humanity than our own. A prior perfected humanity, not necessarily earthborn." You have to understand this is very interesting for a quote that's almost 100 years old.
It is the only year in world history these two objects are seen at the exact same time. And in 522, everything changes. 522 is a very unique year in world history. You see right here, where I have this white box, 522 is the only year in world history that Phoenix and the Nemesis X object appear in the inner system together. Here is Phoenix in 522. Here is Nemesis X object in 522. We don't know which caused which, but this is when the Dark Age began over Europe. Written on his writings on the reign of Octa of Kent, and the Welsh Annals records earthquakes and sky dragons and monsters battling in the sky. 522 is the 60th year of the Nemesis X object in the inner system. Earthquakes devastated Olympia, Greece. Sky dragons were seen over Britain. A celestial war of monsters raining great drops of blood, followed by famine. The old records of Kent record that a strange star appeared attached to a light ray that ended in a flaming dragon. Like I said, the Dark Ages begins here at 522. It is the only year in world history these two objects are seen at the exact same time. In the Old Britain record, it is claimed a celestial war of monsters. This implies visibility on two separate objects or more. During this 60-year presence, the Mosh culture of Peru absolutely vanishes. It is an anthropological mystery.
I agree. That's insane. So yeah, we can go into calendars real deep. Today we're pressed for time. So,
right.
So I tell you what, 1890, something unusual happened. Not a whole lot, but in the year 1890, a bright object traversed over the sky over North America, passing over 100 degrees degrees of the vault of the sky, and it wasn't like an asteroid, and it was too fast to be a comet because it passed over 100 degrees of the arc of the sky over North America, and it took 45 minutes to do it. It's almost as if something was wanting to be seen. Whatever it was, to do that, it had to have been gigantic. But this happened in the year 1890. So, but 1890 is also the year where something unusual happened over North America, centrally located at Ohio. I think me and you don't talk about this, or someone else and I. Maybe it was autodidactic.
Yeah, I don't think that was me.
But in 1890, people were astonished to look up in the sky and see what looked like a floating city just hovering over Ohio.
Because you talk about the 138-day year cycle, and the last catastrophe was in 1902, which really does absolutely coincide with a lot of amazing wars that were happening. The Boer Wars, Russia against Japan, Russia lost. The US invaded the Philippines. Around 1899, 1900, 1901, and 1902, there were all these world-changing pre-World War wars, which are very, very significant. And you're saying that in 1902, there was this cyclical visitation which caused a catastrophe, and 130 years after that, 38 years after that, which will be in 2040, the same will repeat. Is that right?
Exactly. In 1902, the reset was multifaceted. I had to release 3 or 4 different videos just about the year 1902. It is so profound. So much happened. All the things you read in the book of Revelation in Revelation chapter 6 about the 6th seal, it happened to a minor degree in 1902. But in 1902, we have a very, very advanced reset, because it wasn't just an astronomical evidence that the Phoenix was approaching it, and it made transit and then left the system again. What we had was someone on the outside of the simulacrum had edited in all the changes that they wanted, and they happened in a blink. At the exact same time, over 500 new companies appeared out of nowhere. And you can Google all the companies that debuted in 1902. These are Fortune 500 companies that exist today. Many of them have changed their names to conceal their identities. But hundreds of corporations, countries, and government agencies all just appeared out of nowhere in 1902. There's not a hint of their existence in 1901. 1902, come 1903 and 1904, it seems like the entire world had forgotten that in 1901 and in 1899, there was world wars going all over the place. It was completely scratched out of the historical record. After 1902, in the month of May, all that changed. And we had this really bizarre change, this dynamic in the infrastructure of civilizations, where all of a sudden all these banks and corporations and everything just took off, as if 1902 was actually the first year, the initiating year of what we know of as the last day.
And this is what we're going to find in 1902, because the Phoenix destroyed a lot, but it also gave rise and birthed a whole new echelon of so many things that you and I take for granted today that did not exist in 1901. I'm going to repeat that. In this video, I am going to list probably close to 100 things that did not exist in 1901. But in 1902, all of a sudden, they all exist. And they're all experienced by you on a weekly and daily basis. These are common household and common cultural items around us everywhere. And they were introduced into our world on a Phoenix year. So let's get to it. Remember, our actual year begins as soon as February is over. The end of the year was the Februm. It's Februum, the Februum. February was the last month.
This is easily shown. I've already told you guys. I've stumbled over it a few times because it kind of gets you, but you already know September, October, November, and December are supposed to be our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th months, but they're named the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th months in Latin. And that's because January is the 11th month, February is the 12th month, New Year starts with March. This is the ancient system. This is why we still have 2 weeks left in 2023. 2024 begins as soon as March begins. This is how the Phoenix years work as well. Actually, the Phoenix years are vernal equinox. March 21st is the beginning of the year. All right. And this is why the ancient Egyptian civilization is not on the north coast where it should be in the Mediterranean, where their trade alliances would have been formed and their trade ports and their most chief cities should have been developed. Instead, the most ancient Egypt that we know of today, the Chemitian Egypt, Kemet, is 500 miles to the south and has no pyramids. They buried their dead in the Valley of the Kings, not in giant monuments. He is also the father of metallurgy, a very unusual fact since no metals of any significance have ever been mined in Mesopotamia. Ignatius Donnelly, concerning the beliefs of Oannes, wrote, "This is clearly the tradition preserved by a barbarous people of the great ships of a civilized nation who colonized their coast and introduced the arts and sciences among them. In every instance, the first appearance of the Anunna coincides with natural disasters and the arrival of a fleet of ships. The more we study the pieces of the past, the more we find advanced humans mistaken for gods upon their arrival among very primitive non-Caucasian peoples. The civilization of Egypt at its first appearance was of a higher order than any subsequent period of its history, thus testifying that it drew its greatness from a fountain higher than itself." And this is an admission by the scholars, the academics. They are conceding that yes, civilization suddenly appeared and it was of such a high degree that later Egyptian dynasties, 26 dynasties, never achieved the level of sophistication that was at the very start.
The pyramid, built by the Toltecs, not the Aztec.
Yep.
Yeah, the Aztec venerated the area. It was actual Toltecs that built it.
That's right.
But one of the greatest ancient civilizations ever found on this planet is, this world is in Mexico in the 1910s, 1911, 1912 by William Niven and published all the way to the 40s. It was in Mexico, and it's phenomenal because it shows humans side by side with megafauna, giant woolly mammoths, woolly deals. We're in pyramid cities, and it's incredible. Any of you want familiar with that? All you got to do is Google William Niven, this ancient cities of Mexico. They were found 40 feet underground. It's fascinating.
Do you think the pyramids actually form an octahedron shape? So just like what you see above the Earth is what you're going to see below.
They also hid whatever mechanism went up and down that grand gallery, because some type of wheeled circular mechanism with spokes definitely went at high velocity up and down the grand gallery, because we can see the niches that go up. They're for cog wheels.
I'm 17,987 turnings of the stars old. And if I was to take that same system, which means I'm 49 years old right now, if I was to take the same system and apply it to the ancient cuneiform tablets like it's supposed to be applied to, and divide all those numbers by 360, then I'm going to get exactly the timelines that are presented. This is why I know that the Kish dynasty lasted not hundreds of thousands of years, but it lasted 108 years. This is how I know that Zechariah Sitchin's whole chronology completely falls apart. Therefore, if Zechariah Sitchin is the top of a pyramid promoting a whole entirely false version of history, then every single person that follows that same paradigm, like Billy Carson, is absolutely full of shit. Now, do they believe that 500,000 years ago, gods appeared, built cities, and then there was a great flood that was in our recent period, but those cities were actually begun 432,000 years ago, and that 7 kings ruled in the span of time of that 500,000 years, and the 7th king only died recently, 3,500 years ago, at the Great Flood? Oh my God, the suspension of disbelief is amazing. What these people can be made to believe is astonishing. I'm not willing to suspend my disbelief that much because the math don't lie. They're just applying it totally wrong. For years, people built walled communities to keep safe from the gigantic animals and insects that thrived under this new biosphere. Settlements like Jericho, Göbekli Tepe, Acambaro, and Catalhoyuk. Acambaro, Mexico has yielded over 33,500 objects of ceramic stone, including jade and knives of obsidian sharper than steel and still used today in heart surgeries. Bizarre statuettes are among them, some of a very erotic nature. Representations of Negroes, Orientals, of bearded Caucasians, and even Bigfoot-type creatures. Humans writing and interacting with anatomically correct prehistoric animals are in this collection. But this was not millions of years ago. Radiocarbon analysis estimates they date about 4000 BC. That's a real close approximate for 3895 BC, within 140 years. 110 years, actually. Discovered by Jules Rube in 1944, the artifacts were unearthed with the teeth of an extinct Ice Age horse and the skeleton of a mammoth, just south of Texas at Acambaro, Mexico. Hesiod wrote that Typhon appeared in the sky with strange heads. This is an old designation for comets with black tails. The dragon heads gave off flames and vibrated the earth with noises as mountains trembled. Thunderbolts struck the earth as water boiled until a fiery hurricane was born. Earthquakes shook the land and the sea overextended its bounds. The disaster concluded with powerful lightning bolts flashing between Earth and Typhon, which gave rise to the innumerable legends of a hero god who slew a sky monster with his labrys, which was the thunderbolt later stylized into a battle axe. For that which is new came from that which is old, and what is old shall replace the new. And once again, the ancient ones shall rule upon the face of the earth. Sumerian and Babylonian scholars are not unaware of these same traditions, for they fill up hundreds of Euphratean texts. Our ancestors remembered the region of the 7 kings of the Anunnaki, the reign of the 7 kings of the Anunnaki, and their 600-year rule over mankind before the flood, a subject provided in depth in another work of mine titled Return of the Fallen Ones. This gate mentioned in the Necronomicon is the same as the gate of Rostal of ancient Egypt. It is the same one of the Gnostic records guarded by Kalapatoroth, the Sphinx. It is noteworthy that in the earliest records of the human race, the gods are physical beings who created Earth and then visited it. No other deities are known, no primordial unseen creator. The oldest texts leave no room for doubt. The only gods the pre-flood ancients knew came from heaven. It was after the Great Deluge and after the disappearance of the Anunnaki did religionists invent the fall of man traditions by rewriting particulars that had only pertained to the fall of the gods. If there is a conflict in heaven, if there is an ongoing war in the heavenly realm, if there is to be a reckoning, a divine judgment executed against one or more groups, these have nothing to do with mankind. Humans are DNA and harvest, victims of off-world manipulation, and enemy-manufactured humans with the unintended result of the designer DNA creating sentience enough that unconfined spirits outside the holosphere were pulled into physical bodies. Humans are biological spirit prisons, and this unintended consequence initiated a rift between opposing Anunna groups. They were all over the place in the ancient world. But these Danan, all 3 of them were in the same geographical area. Now, overlay these 3 large colonies in the area of Greece with the indigenous Achaeans, and then the local people of Argos, and the descendant and the rising empire of Mycenae. All this is in the same area. It's a huge melting pot, so it created a lot of socio-political problems. And one of those was the famous battle called the 7 against Thebes. Thebes was a city with 7 gates, and 7 different armies were assigned to assail each of the gates of Thebes. But this This conflict went over and it passed, but things did not get better because we have a conflict, a trade war that involved the Sea People's Confederation. We have already shown that Enoch and Enki are the same person, that the great cataclysm that occurred when the Anunnaki first appeared, Enki among them, was centrally located in Egypt. Ancient Egypt was the Gihon River, the Nile. So we should not be so surprised to find that an Arabian scholar recording a tradition that was over 1,000 years old and recorded 1,000 years ago, right before he died in 967 AD, the Arab scholar Masaudi wrote this about this most amazing king who lived a long time ago. Every 138 years, this phenomenon occurs, but it occurs at different degrees of magnitude. So we have this pattern. We already know it. We've already established it on this channel. It's every 138 years this phenomenon occurs, but it occurs at different degrees of magnitude. Sometimes it's regional, it's highly localized. Other times it's hemispheric. 4 times so far it's been worldwide. In 1869, the U.S. federal government abolished the white disenfranchisement laws that gave over white properties to blacks after the Civil War because of the financial abuses that were occurring, and the KKK was dissolved by federal pressure. This was 33 years before 1902, but 33 years after 1902 was 1935, when the Nazis condemned the Jews for financial malpractices and ordered them out of their country, arresting many of them.
That's really interesting, because 1,656 months is 138 years. So, other evidence about the 138-year holography is interesting because it comes in the form of the ancient lunar calendar. The Egyptians were really big on dating things by months, not years. And there is an Egyptian text that refers to a flooding happening at the end of a 1,656 month period. That's really interesting because 1,656 months is 138 years. In Central America is a pyramid complex built by the Toltecs. The dimensions of those pyramids relate to the number 138. The height and the distance between both pyramids, both of them are commensurate with 138's value, the value of 138. But pyramids being associated to 138 is not novel, because the Great Pyramid in Egypt, the only pyramid in the entire world that has an ascendant passage, that has a grand gallery, that has a king's chamber, and has an antechamber going into the king's chamber. No other pyramids in the world have these features, because no other pyramids in the world were built when these features were known.
But we're not finished. In 1858, the British Parliament altered the Oath of Allegiance to allow Lionel de Rothschild a seat at Parliament, knowing he was Jewish. This was 44 years before 1902, and 44 years after 1902 was 1946, when the Jewish-dominated United Nations begins convening in London, and the Jews enjoy their retribution over German officers in the executions at the illegal Nuremberg trials.
Akkadian texts and the Egyptian Turin Papyrus have the moon existing before the sun. Ancient American traditions have Venus existing before the sun, and this is mentioned in the 1870s by Gerald Massey in his lectures. This is because the vapor canopy hid the sun by day, but magnified Venus and the stars at night.
A war for the daughters of men in Genesis VI. It's not what you think. The Jewish version would have you believe that it gave birth to mutants and demons and all that. It's not true. It's not true. The intermixture of the Anunna blood and the blood of the indigenous peoples that were already here gave rise to a race that was hyper intelligent, taller. They were considered as demigods. In ancient Egypt, they were called the Shemsu Hor. They were called the Shining Ones. These were the demigods, the silver race. These people were basically the hybrids between the Anunna and the indigenous people in this world today.
The indigenous people were here way before Caucasians ever showed up.
The variations in the human genome due to these disparate environments may not have been so marked. However, when crossbreeding with Homo sapiens at different stages of genetic manufacturing, the changes barely noticed between Anunna of variant backgrounds actually produced drastic changes in Homo sapiens descended from them. A great sun ruled the day and a lesser sun ruled the night. Reptiles, amphibians, flora, and marine life grew to colossal sizes. They excelled in learning and discovered the harrowing truth that they existed within a simulacrum, a programmed reality. Even in Genesis, there is no mention in the creation account of a moon, but instead the text reads, "And God made two great lights, and the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also." This text concerns luminaries, the hollow field above, not the moon. We may be very uncomfortable going 19 miles underneath the surface of the earth. It may be a very different environment. It may be a very different type of air pressure. I don't know. Exposure to different types of radiations, it might be very, very different. It would activate different latent genes, and some of our junk DNA would then not be junk. It would be activated, and we would develop more characteristics and ways to adapt to that environment. But it would be our children that would be fully developed to live in that environment. The entire layout of the Giza complex is misdirection, designed by Enki to create geometrical relationships that direct focus away from the Great Pyramid, which is at the edge of the complex, to focus on the second pyramid, which the Sphinx is positioned directly in front of. Enki had to perpetuate the deception over the entire human race in order to save them at a far future date. The deceit over humanity was further necessary to ensure the simulacrum would not realize that it had been compromised until it was too late. Having the craftsmen of their human vassals participate in the building of the other Giza pyramids further strengthened the deception. The more pyramids built, the more the simulacrum would deem them unimportant. In the book New Worlds in the Cosmos, astrophysicists Michael Mayer and Pierre-Yves Frey revealed that gigantic Jupiter-sized planets have been discovered orbiting other suns in vastly irregular elliptical orbits. Exoplanet HD 80606b is over 4 times the size of Jupiter, orbiting around the star Upsilon Andromeda with a periastron of 1.6 AUs, with an orbit taking it out 3.4 AUs away from its sun. Nibiru's elliptical orbit is no longer theoretical, but demonstrative, and demonstrative by modern physicists.
Was there a period of paradise where humanity was protected in a walled enclosure and taken care of by the gods? In Genesis, year 1, our 3895 BC, it marked mankind's curse and banishment from Eden, which was the 144th year since 4039 BC, when the Anunnaki arrived via the moon. We just can't ignore the Kabbalistic tradition either, that Adam was assigned the number 144. This can be found in the book The Knights Templar in the New World on page 125. But even more so, in Gematria, Adam is Adum, A-D-M, or 1440. But 0 has no placement value, thus Adam is 144. A fact mentioned in the very enigmatic text, the Rosicrucian Cosmo Connection, on page 500. Another very large book that took me a while to get through. Further, the very first verse in the Bible, the first phrase in the book of Genesis is, "in the beginning." But it has a root containing kedem, which has a geometrical value of 144. But it carries with it the idea of something that is eternal. And according to Bonnie Gaunt, Beginnings, the Sacred Design, this is the very first thought in the sacred writ. So counting yet another 600 years backward through history gets us to the year 4639 BC. so far before the historical record that we cannot know anything about this date other than its connection to the Anunnaki.
We have an enemy. He's a common enemy, but he's a mastermind. He created divisiveness, and he knew by altering the genome to create subtle changes in the human species and then encode emotional markers in that coding to make us dislike people who are not like ourselves. Man, you can break free of that programming, but it's difficult because everything around you serves as a catalyst to fall back into those synaptic fail-safes. That's what they are. They were programmed by an enemy, but we're going to override that.
This is very intriguing because 430 years after 1877 BC is exactly 1447 BC. According to the book of Exodus, the Israelites escaped Egypt 430 years after the sojourn in Egypt beginning in 1877 BC, when Abraham was told by God his descendants would be a captive in Egypt. This is recorded and ascertained by adding up the ages of the 10 patriarchs and deriving at the year 1656. In 1656, of the Great Flood, being 792 years before the Exodus, many people have made the discovery that in the biblical chronology, like Stephen Jones himself dates the Abrahamic covenant at exactly 1877 BC, and so have other authors by the clues that are given in the Genesis narrative alone and no other books. Now, this was the institution of the Abrahamic covenant in 1877 BC, and the church father and historian Eusebius over 15 centuries ago in his Chronicon wrote that the Exodus occurred 430 years after God and Abraham entered into the covenant. This is very intriguing because 430 years after 1877 BC is exactly 1447 BC.
This monument is also alluded to in the Sumerian text, for it was there that Enki built his house, called Iabzu, or the House of the Deep, his sacred precinct in Eridu. This links the Sumerian Enki to the biblical person of Enoch, for which many non-canonical and other documents assert was the builder of the Great Pyramid complex. Additionally, Eridu is the biblical Irad in Genesis that was built by none other than Enoch.
In another famous book, Dr. Teal of Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings dates the Exodus history to the year 1447 BC. And remarkably, United States cryptologist R.A. Boulay, a former NSA officer, developed a system to study the numbers of the Bible and determined that the Exodus event had to have happened in the year of our calendar, 1447 BC. And then one of my favorites that I cite frequently throughout my videos is Stephen Jones' research published in The Secrets of Time, where he uses the entire Old Testament, Book of Jasher, Book of Jubilees, the Assyrian eponyms, some other apocryphal and pseudepigraphical texts, and he derives the date and claims that the date for the Exodus in our calendar was 1447 BC, but in the old world's calendar, it was 2448. The Book of Jasher Chronology also has the Exodus event occurring in the year 2448. Archbishop James Ussher, over 360 years ago, in his famous book, Annals of the World, also dated the Exodus event in the year of the old world, 2448 Annus Mundi. From diverse sources, we find that the Exodus event was in 2448 of the old world's calendar, while also being 1447 BC of our modern reckoning.
In the mind of Eugenius, it was the order of Freemasons who were preserving the ancient knowledge that they were a separate group from those builders who rejected the chief cornerstone. So, in the dedication is a curious passage. The heavens speak forth the glory of God, and the firmament announceth the work of his hands. This earth we inhabit is indeed a wonderful piece of structure. Unquote. That's a very interesting thing to say back then. And again on page 9, still in the dedication, is another gem. He wrote, "This I hint to you as a caution not to run on with the unthinking herd." Here is a teaching of the value of individuality, of being separate from the collective. The high cultivation and potential of Cro-Magnon were the magnum opus of Homo Annunna's genetic engineering, and therefore a threat. In unrecorded history prior to 4309 BC, when their civilization was destroyed, Homo Annunna visited Earth, created Cro-Magnon after using mammalian DNA after a period of development and failures. The product complete and performing as intended, Homo Annunna had departed. There are no ancient references to an Anunnaki crossbreeding with Negroid humans. In fact, Homo sapiens, including Negroid, were not considered breeding stock until they were upgraded as Adamu from the birth goddesses campaigns. The red-skinned, black-haired, black-eyed, smooth-skinned humans able to procreate on their own. To date, we have found the archaeological evidence of cities and civilizations that reached a very high level of sophistication, built by Negroid, by Mongoloid, by the Amerindic and the Dark Caucasoid races of the past. But in every instance, those civilizations collapsed and fell. Whereas when Caucasians spread around the world and began colonizing and reintroducing elements of civilization, these civilizations again had a renaissance, and they revived, and in every historical instance, a phoenix cataclysm totally ended every civilization that had reached such a high attainability, except for those who suffered the genetic fail-safes that they basically imploded their own cultures. In this video, I will not go into details, but suffice it to know that the same group of international financiers who bankrolled World War II also conspired to break the United States into different, more manageable countries in the war between the states. The Civil War was pre-planned and financed by the exact same people. The parallels here are very deep. This great division in the pre-flood world separating the Caucasian civilizers from all the lunar goddess-venerating dark races manifested in a whole new unique way after the vanishing of the gods. End of the contact period in 2647 BC. Two major cultural themes survived the pre-flood world to be carried on after the destruction. Two competing ways of life clashed, forging two distinct types of dynasties, the Hunter Kings and the Shepherd Kings. The Cro-Magnon, we have excavated and studied a post-cataclysmic culture after an Ice Age period, is clearly seen in that the Cro-Magnon lived and hunted in a world of the megafauna. Enormous mammals like the mammoth depicted in Cro-Magnon are now known to have been a temperate to tropical animal. And as soon as the Nemesis X object passed in the sky, 1/3 of the entire world's population died. During the aftermath of that destruction, a new race of people appeared in the world. They were bearded, they were tall, they were very, very, very pale with deep lapis lazuli eyes. Though the Royal Asiatic Society in England discovered yet another copy of the Book of Jasher far away in Calcutta, this fascinating chronological record of the pre-flood world and ancient history thereafter is only now beginning in the 21st century to gain prominence among serious researchers. However, there is a collection of writings that came to be called the Book of the Upright, a very, very old provenance The fragments of this book are of such antiquity that we find even word-for-word passages mirroring old clay and cuneiform and stone writings from 2,000 years earlier. It is very unique. It's also highly controversial, and scholars have done a great disservice in trying to try to disprove the antiquity of this book. It is called the Book of the Upright. Many of you know it as the Book of Jasher. Now, 2,000 years ago, the renowned Jewish historian Flavius Josephus had pretty much written about the Book of Jasher, saying that it was largely unknown even in his time and forgotten outside the temple in Jerusalem.
So, and I didn't even realize this until I had pulled my Chronicon back out. I hadn't even looked at Chronicon in like 2 years as I was putting all my videos together. I had all these notes I was doing my videos from. But as you know, Gary, recently, like a couple of weeks ago, I started doing Chronicon videos.
Yeah.
Live video.
Your book is like this
where
big.
I'm going through Chronicles. Oh, it's huge. That's right here. It's huge. But when I go through Chronicles, I'm rediscovering a lot of these things that I wish I would have been doing videos straight out of Chronicles before, because I got 500 videos in Chronicles. So I'm seeing all these cross-calendrical parallels that I documented 10 and 15 years ago that I totally forgot about. So I just wanted to bring those to your attention, because that is another way. Isometric projection analysis is not the only way to figure out the timing of future events. Cross-calendrical parallels is also an excellent way to show that not only is the nature of time-space holographic, but we can use these historical events for predictive value.
Yeah, I think I get it. I want to ask a question really quick, though.
We are cloning again. We've seen clones in the media. We are conducting genetic manipulations. The cloning of the sheep Dolly in 1999 was just the beginning. And the mapping of the genome project in 2001, that was 50 years after we had really done it. So, like I said, the past is a predicate for the future. Wilson notes that American Bob Carlin aboard the research vessel Noor found evidence of a one-time massive underwater sedimentary avalanche at the location where the Bosphorus joins the Black Sea. And this is exactly what is expected to be found if a tsunami carrying a tremendous amount of debris that had washed from previously unflooded areas, hundreds of miles per hour, it was just carrying all the detritus as it went and just plunged over civilization after city, over culture, community, and just obliterated those regions. A drowned former coastline, an old shoreline, was discovered at a depth of 358 feet under the surface of the Black Sea by oceanographer Dr. Petko Dimitrov of Bulgaria. At the bottom of the Black Sea bed is a 40-inch thick layer of sapropel, which is mud thick with decomposed plant and animal remains from a prior freshwater lake.
Now imagine the elite begin preparing to reestablish their dominance over a post-cataclysmic world full of people who suffer the loss of their infrastructures. Some cities are still untouched, but by that event date, they had been corralled by the elite into going 100% solar. But the canopy blocks this light. They rely on their wind turbines, but the new sky is still and heavy. They change over their transportation to electric, but the fossil fuel industry is ruined and cannot produce generators for power.
But completely independent of the dating of the flood, this chart shows something very phenomenal, because this chart demonstrates that ancient authors and historians and chronologers had absolutely dated to the exact same period a series of events involving Babylonian history, but some of them used years and some of them used the day count system of the ancient Chaldeans and Sumerians instead of the modern interpretation of the Shar, meaning year. This is profound.
In 1790, the modern world found the Aztec prophecy stone, and now counting 128 years after 1918 is 2046. Here is a perfect isometric projection for those of you who have been following my other posts on Ophis and Gameseer concerning the predictive value of isometric projective analysis. The Anunnaki coded humans to obey, to carry out routines, to bear circumstances with little thought of altering their conditions. Orientals are fantastic culture bearers, carrying their civilization virtually unchanged for over 4,000 years until Caucasians arrived on their shores in the last 140 years and using military ships made them open their ports and included them in the glowing global industrial technological complex. Not only were the narratives of Sumerian antiquity given as first-person accounts, as also found in the book of Genesis, told to the people by the Anunna themselves, but some Anunnaki never left Earth. They remained marooned to live among the human family. William Brambley in Gods of Eden wrote, "Human beings appear to be a slave race, languishing on an isolated planet in a small galaxy.
As such, the human race was once a source of labor for an extraterrestrial civilization and still remains a possession today. When modern Homo sapiens served and lived among Homo Annuna from 3439 BC to 2647 BC, the concept of their world was more sophisticated than mankind 1,000 years later. The last documented presence of the Anunna was in their mass exodus in the year 2647 BC, due to cataclysm and the appearance of Nibiru. There is more evidence of the Anunna vanishing into underground facilities and whole multi-level subterranean cities than anyone ever departing this world for the skies. These immense underground cities have been found in the dozens in Turkey, in ancient Anatolia. The first was excavated in 1962, and anybody can Google the underground cities of Turkey. They've already found 60 of them. Now, we have more evidence that these civilization builders come up from their facilities from underground than ever they descended from the skies. It's very interesting what we're uncovering. The oldest writings in the world are not religious. They tell matter-of-factly of gods that manufactured humans both before and after major disasters. The only architectural presence of humans known to archaeology prior to 2200 BC are town-sized settlements, many exhibiting evidence of advanced urban engineering and planning, the scattered survivors of a prior civilization destroyed by a cataclysm anterior to that of the Great Flood of 2239 BC. These translators found multitudes of references to Anunna having appeared on Earth from the deep. This deep, Abzu, was originally an astronomical designation for the largely unknown abyss of the southern hemispheric space, the region of space below our solar system that cannot be viewed from the northern hemisphere. You must realize almost every civilization in antiquity was north of the equator. They could not see the stars of the southern hemisphere. These were the abyssal stars. In Babylon, artists showed gods emerging from the sea, a terrestrial abyss, and soon after, reliefs gave such marine deities amphibious characteristics. Later scribes compounded the association until the gods almost 1,000 years after the Great Flood of 2239 BC were represented as part fish. Even later in time, they would be represented with wings to symbolize their origin from the sky and ability to fly. And the concept of angels was born. Anunnaki human unions continued for at least 6 centuries, the two separate races sharing the same gene pool. This history is considered today definitely racist, but nonetheless true, and supported by non-Caucasian ancient testimony. The entire Genesis 6 passage concerning the sons of gods and the daughters of men that created a mighty race of heroes, men of renown, is the old world's testimony of the birth of a new race into the world before the flood, the Caucasian race, who inherited the height, intellect, physical characteristics, beards and eyes, and knowledges and technology of their Homo Annuna fathers. In 2729 BC, the Anunnaki abandoned Eridu, biblical Irad, moving kingship to Badtabira. This dynasty of 3 kings would last 300 years. Now, if you remember, we saw that Enochian dynasty lasted 300 years as well. This is 108,000 days, to the year 2349 BC. In 2357 BC, Tiku's son Yao ascends the throne of China, thus beginning the historical period. He wrote of the ancient Zoroastrian belief in great world ages of 3,000 years, involving a period where at the end a god is overthrown and another takes his place. And 3,000 years from 5239 BC is the Great Deluge date of 2239 BC, when the Watchers were confined and their offspring perished in the cataclysm. The god Azazel, presented in the rabbinical writings as a demon, was imprisoned. The Anunnaki chronology began in 5239 BC, counting 600 years to 4639 BC, then to 4039 BC when the moon appeared in the capture flood, then 600 more years to the arrival of the Anunnaki under Enki in the year 3439 BC. The catalyst of the heavenly rebellion was a secret so profound that even today humanity is largely ignorant of it. It is the identity and eternal destiny of mankind.
Humanity has something the angels do not. In the beginning, the angels were created out of divine fire, and for this fact they were very proud. However, mankind was created later from lesser materials, earth and the soil, which offended the angels, and by revelation within the tablets of destinies was it discovered by Zu, who now becomes Satan or the adversary, that this inferior being was to be made complete by the very Spirit of the Almighty. The breath of God breathed into the Adamu. Humans were going to be formed into the terrestrial image of God, being made of 66.6% soil and created essence, the soul and mind, but finished with 33.3% of the eternal living Spirit of God, of which the angels had not been made from. God himself would live in man. The Holy Spirit is eternal, having no beginning and no end, something no resident of distant heaven could claim. Mankind is thus 33.3% divinity, encased in mortal trappings designed to forge the spirit into the image of the living God. This prophecy in the tablets of heaven was broadcast to all the angels, and they were confronted with a choice: to succumb to the will of the Creator and serve this newer being made of earth, or rebel, build their own kingdom, and try to abort the plans of God. The oldest religious records and traditions agree on some very intriguing elements that concern humanity. All over the world, a thread of stories and traditions and legends and lore and myths and even ancient texts basically tell the same story but from different cultural perspectives. A controversy existed between non-humans before humans later became involved. This contention led to a war. The defeated group was a third of the population of the whole. The defeated became exiles that were then sent into this earth. A final war would be fought to conclude this controversy. An old Gnostic text studied by Theodore Barconi that unveils a knowledge of a pre-Adamic world reads, "Before the beginning of all things, there had been a divinity who divided himself in two, and from whom the good and evil came. The good gathered to the light, and the evil the darkness. Then the evil gained understanding, and arose to make war upon the Father of greatness. The Father of greatness pronounced a word from which the Lord God had created. The Lord God in his turn uttered 7 words from which were born 7 powers. But 7 demons set themselves up against the powers he had engineered. After having shackled these adversaries, they stole from the Father of greatness the principle of the human soul. The demons then began to cleanse and scour Adam, the first man, but the Lord God came and destroyed Adam and then remade him." The Gnostics were researchers of the oldest writings and beliefs, and this was 20 centuries ago. They had an acute grasp of what really transpired in the beginning between the Anunnaki, the 7 demons, and the Godhead over mankind, Adam, or Adamu. El became Elohim, as shown in Genesis 1, God dividing himself into the Father, the Spirit, and the Word, Lord God. Evil gained understanding is a reference to the pre-Adamic prophecy of another being going to be introduced into the creation that was destined to be exalted even higher than the angels who were first. This knowledge came from the tablets of destinies, also called the tables of heaven, which the tree of knowledge symbolized. The epithet of Lord God is never used in Genesis 1, which was a primordial record of the renovation of earth, but from Genesis 2 onward, the title Lord God is found everywhere. This shows that Genesis 1 is truly an ancient record of the creation that antedates the Bible, and was used to prefix the Genesis text. This further explains why Genesis has 2 distinct creation accounts, and why throughout the entire Bible, God is said to have created everything with his hands in the very beginning, and he also spoke everything into existence, Genesis 1. The only thing in Genesis that God made with his hands was mankind, which was made in the image of God, from soil materials from an archaic planet, a new creation. The 7 words used in creation is a reference to the first verse in Genesis 1, which is exactly 7 words in Hebrew. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The 7 demons are linked to the 7 days of God's restoration of earth as preserved in Genesis 1, because it was then that the imprisoned Anunnaki, the shackled demons, were released for 144 years before year 1 of the Annus Muni chronology, and 144 hours before the new creation. 144 hours being 6 days. Remember, 6 was the number of man. Man was made in the 6th day. Now, these chronological monikers here are going to be, we're going to go into great detail those in a coming video, coming very soon in this series. Now, in ancient heaven, the demons sought to alter mankind, knowing his seed, his offspring, would one day defeat and replace the seed of heaven, the angelic sons of God that rebelled. I'm going to repeat that. In the ancient book of Jubilees, which is at least over 2,000 years old, we find that the measurement to determine a person's life was only counted in days. They did not count them in years. The records of the Sumerians themselves dispel the Shar year theory and reveals the origins of our present timekeeping system used around the world today. Thousands of cuneiform tablets have been excavated and translated that show precise tabulations of sunsets and moonrises, a system of measurement linking Genesis 1 to ancient Sumer. The defeated became exiles that were then sent into this earth. The oldest religious records and traditions agree on some very intriguing elements that concern humanity. All over the world, a thread of stories and traditions and legends and lore and myths and even ancient texts basically tell the same story but from different cultural perspectives. A controversy existed between non-humans before humans later became involved. This contention led to a war. The defeated group was a third of the population of the whole. The defeated became exiles that were then sent into this earth. A final war would be fought to conclude this controversy. 600 years later, we have the beginning of the Anunnaki dynasty starting at Badtabira, the 7 kings of Sumer, in 2839 BC, and the birth of the hero Noah, who was the progeny of a union of gods and men. 600 years later, we have the epic and worldwide renowned Great Flood. For the misinformation that has saturated the genre of books published on ancient astronaut theory, we have Zecharia Sitchin to thank. Sitchin's belief that Nibiru's orbit was 3,600 years derives from a mistake. That the deluge occurred in the 120th Shar induced Sitchin to multiply 3,600 years by 120 to produce 432,000, quote, years, unquote, from the arrival of the Anunnaki to the Great Flood, an error even Vedic chronographers made in determining the duration of the yugas, the world ages. A pre-flood year was 360 days. The calendrical systems of all ancient 3rd millennium BC civilizations was 360 days a year. Thus, a decade, a unit of 10, was 3,600 days. The Shar was a term describing a day and a 120-year period. The historically recorded 10 Shars from the descent of the Anunnaki to the Great Flood was simply 120 years times 10 for a period lasting 12 centuries, 1,200 years. This 1,200 years multiplied by 360 days of the Draconian calendar is 432,000 days. Sitchin's mistake was a simple one, but it expanded Anunnaki history from 12 centuries until a cataclysm to almost 500,000 years, an untenable duration. Anything that is alive that lived as long as 432,000 actual years would be something totally different by the end of such a long period. It is a span of time that would make even major events within it to be of no significance. What significance is the Great Flood, which didn't kill everybody in the world, in a time period of 432,000 years, when we know from geology alone that 10 different Great Floods happened in that time, at least? Sitchin's other error was assuming that Nibiru had anything to do with the Great Flood cataclysm in 2239 BC. It did not, and as over 30 of my videos mention or reference and show in chronology and in chronography, that event was caused by the Phoenix phenomenon. Just as the shar was a unit of time measuring 120 of something, 10 shars being 1200, so too did the gar measure distance and length.